Welcome to MSP Voice, the weekly show for MSPs by MSPs. Brought to you by Cloudberry, the #1 cross-platform cloud backup. Learn more at cloudberrylab.com. This is MSP Voice. Hello and welcome to MSP Voice. This is episode number 9. So very excited to be here today. We're going to go ahead and continue the series that we started last week called The Best of Reddit. So we have 4 articles for you this week, and then we'll go into our interview portion after that. So let's jump right in. So Best of Reddit. First up is any MSPs experiment with short work days to increase productivity. Very interesting topic. So the gist of it is working 6-hour days instead of 8-hour days. Now, can you still get 40 hours a week in? That's kind of some of the discussion. But a lot of the comments in terms of doing that, were, hey, I'd love to do a 6-hour day if I could get my clients to work 6-hour days. So, typically when you're an MSP, your clients are 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes on the weekends, and of course then there's after hours if something goes wrong. So it's kind of difficult to say, hey, everyone's on a 6-hour work week, especially everyone that you support. Especially if you're a one-man shop, that can be very difficult. You're probably working way more than 40 hours a week if you're just a one-person shop and you have multiple clients. Now, if you're a larger MSP and you have, multiple employees and you have a staff at help desk and you've got techs and those types of things, then it might be a little bit easier to work around some of the scheduling because you can have things overlap. And that's what a lot of the comments, really do talk about. And then, of course, there's the difference between are your employees paid hourly or are they paid salary? And some really good comments. Some people are saying, hey, look, my employees are salaried. As long as they're getting the work done, I trust them, to manage their time. If they need to take a couple hours out to, do an appointment during the day, that's fine. Or if they work late, one night because the customer needed them, they come in late the next day. So there's kind of that flexibility when you have a salaried employee. Now, of course, if you're an hourly employee, you want to work as many hours as a week you can and maybe even get some overtime. So, that's kind of a little bit different there. The other interesting thing I think is, and it was brought up a little bit in some of the comments, but I've actually seen some articles about companies shifting to a 4-day work week instead of a 5-day work week. So, every weekend is a 3-day weekend. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be realistic in the MSP world, unless you have a lot of employees, you can do that. But it is an interesting idea. But then you're talking about 4 10-hour days, so it does kind of make a difference. And if your goal is to get 40 hours a week and you go to 6-hour days, then where are you going to make up that, that additional time in terms of getting your employees to 40 hours a week? So a lot of good, interesting discussion on there. Would love to hear some additional comments if you want to go in and make some comments on that thread. So next up is an interesting article that, apparently Amazon is reportedly developing network switches, and that sends, of course, Cisco shares down. Now, the reference article, which I will link to in the show notes, comes from CRN, where they talk about, they go into the story about how Cisco is reportedly, going to be adding switches. They've got manufacturers lined up, hope they plan to introduce it in the next 18 months. Of course, this is all from a person familiar with the matter, but, of course, anonymous. So, this is all just kind of speculative reporting, but, hey, it may happen. And as we know, anytime Amazon enters a particular market, whether it's switches, healthcare, cloud, it sends that entire industry into a tizzy. Share prices drop for the competitors because, oh no, here comes Amazon, they roll over everything. And that's kind of what the comments say in this Reddit thread. Probably the funniest one and the one that's got the most upvotes, and if you know anything about Amazon and what they sell, it's possible to buy a 55-gallon drum of lube on Amazon. You can go in and search it and do it. So, one of the commenters said Cisco should respond by starting to sell 55 gallons of lube. Basically, Cisco getting into Amazon's business. And that led to some funny, comments in that as well. So, but that was it. That is the one with the most upvotes. It's got the most points. So, take that as it be. But it was kind of funny. But then, of course, a lot of it then delves down into Amazon's business practices. Is Amazon working in the best interest of customers and society in general? Do they skirt the laws? Are they monopolistic? Do they do certain things? And then it goes even further into talking about where Amazon data centers are located and how they're not very secretive about that information. And there are potential for attacks. So a lot of really kind of good conspiracy theory, so to speak, on this thread, discussions about Amazon. So definitely take a read. It's very active, has a lot of comments. Some are funny, some are practical, but just in general, an interesting thought. So next up is kind of the best way to approach a local MSP for a job entry level. So this comes from a user who actually later on in the thread we find out is from Tampa, and I live in St. Petersburg, so kind of a local story for me. But basically, this person is trying to figure out what's the best way to get an entry-level position at an MSP, and very short posts, so we don't know experience level and those types of things. Should it be an email, anything specific to add, to avoid? So just looking for some career advice on how to get started in with an MSP. And kind of the one here, there's not a ton of upvotes on a lot of these, but one of the ones at the top here is go to the location, show confidence. This is me, this is what I do. So that's kind of an interesting aspect, is showing up at the MSP's door and saying, hey, I'd like a job. And some are saying, no, never go to their place, never go to the office. They have enough to deal with. They don't need someone coming in begging for a job. But yet others, who own an MSP business say, show up at the door. This is exactly what to do. Show confidence. Tell them, even if you don't have any experience, tell them what you do from a technical perspective, and customer service as well. This person here that says show up at the door, it is basically said, he's hired, or she has hired, several people who have done just that. Of 5, they've hired 3. And one of them, the fourth that they didn't hire, they actually referred to somebody else where they were a good fit. So that particular case, it was a good idea just to show up at the door. Others, though, tend to kind of go with, send an email, attach your resume, start that way. Others suggest, doing a little investigative work, figure out go to the LinkedIn page for the company, figure out who the principals are, see if you can friend one of them, try to have someone introduce you to a hiring manager, some of the more traditional ways that you might find work and those types of things. So, interesting kind of thread here on career advice, in terms of, hey, I want to work for an MSP. How do I do that? Especially if you have no experience. And, most of the commenters have said, don't worry about your experience. They will teach you, you'll learn as you go along, but be realistic in your salary expectations or how much you're going to get paid if you don't have any experience. But definitely use any and all relevant technical and customer service experience on your resume that you might have. So even if you're have been working at Starbucks as a barista, if you've had an impact at that particular Starbucks because of some of the customer service stuff that you've done, or you have regular customers and those types of things, highlight that, because that shows that you're good at working with the general public. Not all of us are good at working with the general public, so definitely point those things out. And finally, we have kind of a competitive type of post here. When I first read this, I kind of took it the wrong way, based on the first paragraph. I thought this was a one-man shop who's going out of business, but then the second paragraph kind of goes into it. From what I understand, this poster, works for a larger MSP, and their company, maybe not necessarily the poster, but the practices of their company is to go after some of these one-man shops and to start to take their customers, and essentially put them out of business. It's kind of the behemoth versus the little guy, Walmart versus the local market, however you want to frame that. But at the end of the day, it is all about business, and it's kind of a lot of the comments, are interesting. Some say, hey, it's just business. If the one-man shop can't keep up and provide what their clients need, then of course, hey, why not go after their customers and put them out of business? Others talk about the fact that sometimes these one-man shops, one person calls them trunk slammers, is that they don't always do the best stuff technically. They've had, there's one poster where we talked about an instance where they had a customer with Windows Server 2012 licensing, but the MSP told them they needed to downgrade to Windows Server 2003. Who knows? Others talk about, people taking them from Active Directory down to workgroups, and going from Exchange Online, Office 365, back to Exchange on-prem. So it's kind of take it with a grain of salt in terms of some of these comments. But at the end of the day, if you're a one-man shop and you're concerned about losing your business, and who some of the bigger competitors are, or if you're just ready to get out of business in general, as some of the commenters talk about, is go talk to one of your larger competitors. They may be willing to buy your customer list, or buy you out, so to speak, even though you may not have an office or any assets. And one thing that was encouraging is one of the later posts here, where someone talked about how they bought out a one-man shop, and they actually made a deal. So down here, currently the last thread, where they make deals with these one-man shops that say, hey, look, we'll take over your customers, and for the first year, we'll give you 10% of any profits made from those clients, and then after that, we'll give you 5%, from there on out. So, if you're a one-man shop and you're concerned about that, or you're looking to get out of the business, hey, that's a negotiation tactic. Approach a larger MSP and say, look, you can have my customers, but this is what I want. I want 10% of profits for the first year and 5% thereafter. Not necessarily a bad thing. Could be a little bit of a win-win for both involved. So that is the best of Reddit for today, for this week. And now we are going to continue on with our interview. This week we have Stuart Blumenthal of MicroAccounting. So MicroAccounting is not necessarily a typical MSP, but they do some cloud hosting of some accounting software, and I think you're going to find it very interesting. Welcome to the show, Stuart. Glad to have you on from MicroAccounting. Stuart, why don't you give us a little bit of information and tell us about yourself?
Thank you. I'm Stuart Blumenthal, live here in Dallas, as you can probably tell from my jersey behind me. Been doing accounting software consulting, and in our case, hosting as well. I've been doing this for about 30 years, and it's been I came here to Dallas about 3 years ago to head up our MicroAccounting team of our hosting and cloud practice here.
Okay, yeah, and I went to your website, microaccounting.com, and it doesn't scream managed service provider. But yet, you're a customer, you wanted to be on the show, and I think you have to provide some valuable insights. So what is it that MicroAccounting actually does? And what leads you to kind of this MSP podcast, so to speak?
It's a great question. So yeah, we get that question a lot. So we help clients. So what our primary job is at MicroAccounting is that we provide accounting software solutions for companies that outgrow QuickBooks and Peachtree. We've been in business for 30 years. We've got over 700 clients, and about a little bit over 5 years ago, we noticed that, well, almost 10 years ago, but about 5 years ago, we know that the cloud is really the predominant leader in the accounting industry. If you look at things like CRM, Salesforce won. They beat everyone else. So at this point here, from an accounting point of view, we knew we got to get into the cloud world, but it's kind of different. Cloud means different things to different people. There's true cloud, which are products like that we offer, like Sage Intacct, which is 100% cloud-based. You don't care what version you're on. You're on the you just go out to a website.
Yeah.
But then there's a bunch of clients, and again, we have over 700 clients that are running a product called Sage 100, and it's a great product. It's an on-premise product, but they want to move it to the cloud, but the product meets their needs. And so quickly we realized that we had two options. One is to offer hosting ourselves, or start working with another provider. Well, when you start working with other providers, they start, well, your software requires this registry entry, or requires that printers need to be set up this way. And it's always our fault. It's never their fault. And we felt like we were pointing the finger way too many times. It got old, and we know technology here. And so we felt like from an MSP point of view, we should be able to do offering hosting ourselves. So we did that. And what's really interesting is that, we had a bunch of our clients come over to hosting, but what we're finding is that 50% of our deals now involves hosting that they're interested in both the Sage 100 or a on-premise product, and then moving that to the cloud. And so if you even look at the product now, they call it Sage 100 Cloud, and you're like, well, it's not a cloud product. But what we're finding is that we're hosting it, but we're also integrated with Office 365. We're integrated with online payment solutions. So we are cloud in a lot of ways.
Okay, yeah. So it's kind of an interesting take, and I talked to one of our customers a couple of months ago, who it was a similar situation, but it was car dealership software.
Oh, wow.
So car dealerships, they use a specific software, but they've done the same thing. They're working on a cloud solution, but they also have this kind of on-prem solution that they offer, and then they also kind of do a hosting of that on-prem solution too. So it's very similar in terms of how are you offering a service to your customers in that regard. So it's a pretty interesting use case.
Exactly.
What about So what about like the types of customers that you're servicing? Is it is it like a particular vertical that you guys target? Is it small business? Is it enterprise? What's your 700 customers? What do they typically kind of look like?
Well, it's a great question. So a lot of our clients are, I call it mid-market. So small clients are, entry level. They're running QuickBooks, they're running Peachtree, or now called Sage 50. They're really not our target market. Also, enterprise clients are not our target market because, in a lot of ways, they are, they require huge systems. Their ERP is a lot more complex. So we're in that mid-market. Our average size client in our hosting is, we've got some that are small, 3 to 5 users. Our largest one, gosh, I got to say, is they're about 50 to 60 users, but we're not even just doing their accounting for those couple clients. We're doing everything. Like, we end up doing their Active Directory. We're doing their file systems. We're doing their SQL. We're not doing things such as, we're not doing we're telling everyone to go to O365. Microsoft won that game as well. So we don't do Exchange, but everything has to revolve around the accounting software.
Okay. So in a lot of sense, you do provide some of the typical MSP type services to some of your customers because they require it.
Exactly. And, the website, if they have a website, they can throw it up there. In terms of verticals, the verticals we are in are really based around what the product can do. So, very light manufacturing, distribution, we'll do franchises, anything that really, once you start growing your business, it's really hard that like a product like QuickBooks is a great entry level product, but when you start getting into like, I have multiple companies, or I need to do better distribution with more warehouses, or I need barcoding, and those are challenges a lot of other MSPs face. Like, for example, we offer barcoding solutions, so you have to set up point-to-point tunnels, and how do you handle all that type of stuff with the accounting software working with the database that's in sometimes another area, another state.
Yeah. Okay. Now, do you have, I guess, another question is, do you have managed service providers who are customers who are using, the accounting software that you guys offer?
We, a lot of the other Sage partners actually utilize us for their customers. So we're trying to help that. We're trying to help a lot of it because we know Sage 100 really well. They're coming to us and saying, hey, can you get our client hosted up in the cloud? Because what you're finding is that and I think you have to be very careful in the MSP world nowadays, because when you start pulling back the layers, what you find is that if you, for example, you start reading the contracts, and I was reading one other provider's contracts, and it says you're responsible for your own backups. Well, how are you backing up someone's system that's in the cloud? That makes no sense whatsoever. So, those are things that, we have full disclosure. If you want to have nightly reports on your backups, great. We can do that. We have great backup software. But other things that we need to do, we show, hey, if you want to test your disaster recovery, we can schedule those type of things. So we have a very limited, what we're finding is that in the world today, once you start pulling back, a lot of the servers, no offense, you think you're in the cloud and you're hosted in someone's garage. It's, those are things that are happening still.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to create a cloud and make it seem like you're a big business, but actually it's just a bunch of servers in your basement. So
Exactly.
Definitely understand that. So I guess that kind of comes to, it's kind of interesting because, the other thing on your website it says is MicroAccounting is a value-added reseller. So, and as you mentioned, a managed service provider might come to you because their customer needs ERP software. They need, the accounting and those types of things. So you would then help that MSP work with the customer and get them that solution. That's kind of the idea there, right?
It is. I would say that most, again, most MSPs, they're, and a lot of them, they do work right off they're used to dealing with either the tier one or the small company that, they don't want a server at all. So we kind of fit a weird niche market right in between as well, because, it's, a lot of these clients are going through growing pains. This is the first time that, they're going from from a small product to a mid-market, and it's probably one of the most expensive things that they ever want to spend. And it's not a lot of money, but compared to what they've spent before, it's definitely, we're trying to teach them that they have to budget for these things and prepare them in advance. So it's a lot, our goal is to really help clients go from small to medium size. Or once they grow up, that they realize that their shirt's been way too small for them for a long time.
Definitely understand that. So from a advertising, in terms of attracting customers, because you are nationwide. I noticed, you have offices, all over the country. You're not just in one particular area, not serving just one particular geographic area. So, how do you attract customers? How do you, any thoughts on how do you reach that mid market?
Oh, it's one of the biggest challenges of our lives. It's hard. It's if someone had that secret answer, we would be millionaires at this point. But part of it is just constant. For example, we have offices here in Dallas, where we have offices in Ohio, Chicago. So we are pretty much throughout. I think more central United States than anything else. We really the coast to coast stuff. Our reputation kind of gets out there, and so we have a good reputation. We have, after 30 years, we haven't, we're still people speaking about us positively, which is awesome. But from an advertising, we do have marketing. We have a full-time marketing person. She's keeping our website up to date. We do a lot of marketing and, marketing. But it's funny if we were just talking about this the other day. If you look at where did our last group of clients come from, it came from referral. So, we've done a great campaign with, not even a campaign, I hate to use that word, but, we did a great job with one nonprofit here in Dallas, and they're telling all the other nonprofits in the chapters that, hey, look at in MicroAccounting. They did a great job. They did all the integrations for us. So we're very blessed that we do good work, and we do networking, but at the same time, marketing is huge. You have to, I hate to say it, we have to Twitter, we got a Facebook. My kids. I was driving home yesterday with my daughter from college, and she's on the way back preparing for college, and she's like, "You have the dumbest stuff posted on Twitter," and I'm like, "I know, but it's why it's a business Twitter account and not why I put any pictures of you on there." So it's one of those challenges. I mean, you have to. It's a challenge nowadays, separating work from personal.
Yeah, and you mentioned word of mouth, and a lot of the MSPs that we talk to, they serve typically a small geographic area, right? They're not nationwide or anything like what you guys are, but word of mouth obviously is, and referrals is the best way if you can get them. And you mentioned nonprofit. There was I forget which episode it was, but there was someone talking about one of the ways he grows his business is that he goes and focuses on nonprofits and organizations that match his values, and he offers them service, at a bit of a discount than what we would offer a normal business customer. But that kind of, all the nonprofits are somewhat connected, and so they talk to each other, and and it's been a way for him to help grow his business and word of mouth. So, it's always interesting to hear about how people go out and attract different customers.
You're absolutely right. I think that I think in today's world, I mean, it's still, the best part is that, yeah, we're expanding, people are growing state by state, but, I was just talking to, I was just interviewing an employee who lives in Oklahoma, and and I'm like, great. She's like, do I need to move down here? I'm like, no, I'd rather find the best people around the country. So to me, it's like, the reason we have people everywhere is because they hear we do a good job. And the good thing is, just like this here, we're on a, webinar. We can get on anytime. We can get on a GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, Zoom. I don't care what you use, but we can see each other's face, and we can see if you're falling asleep during the meeting. So it's, it's great that we have this type of communication now, and we use it better. I think we use it better than we ever used it before.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads to, one of my next questions is, from a technology perspective, what technology are you most excited about today? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be, related to what you do for your job, but just, consumer electronics. What kind of technologies are you most excited about?
I love process automation. It's the biggest thing is that if we can save a client, in the old days, you used to hear people saying, I'm going to put a system in, I'm going to replace it with 5 people. And I think that is completely wrong. What I like to do nowadays is automate the processes and keep that person there to do more important things, and really look at ways of growing the company or cutting costs in terms of, people are not managing their business. They're just managing the issues right in front of them. So, to me, I always love process automation. I love, and a lot of that really stems from, from a technology point of view. I love, still love SQL Server. I love some of the stuff that Microsoft is coming down with, like, like even Excel, like 2016 with Power Pivot, and business intelligence, and all this. I don't even say, that all business intelligence as well. There's some amazing technologies. To me, it's more important, like, how do the systems talk to each other? That's really it. And companies need that more than ever. It's funny. The whole process automation, how systems communicate together, that's what excites me. It's what keeps me going, because if all these systems were like, I'm going to export here, and then I'm going to take that flat file and I'm going to import it over here, oh my gosh, those are the old days.
Yeah, EDP it. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Exactly.
I've been around technology, and long enough to see some of the amazing changes that have taken place, and cloud is a big driver of that. It makes it much easier to interconnect a lot of these systems.
Well, and it's also but it also makes a challenge. For example, so one of the projects we just did was that we did a huge Salesforce integration to Intact using, but what we did was for a nonprofit. So the donor management software had to go back and forth, and so you run into challenges because you've got to, they're not on-prem systems. You're not doing SQL updates. You're doing API calls between the two.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden that system goes down for maintenance. How do you handle that type of stuff? So we've used in our cloud-based products, we use a middleware product that can do those basically do the pipes and do the process automation.
Okay.
But it's harder because I think cloud, and the other thing about cloud is that, remember, we're not seeing the database. So where an old person who loves SQL goes in there and goes, update this table and just do a set value, you can't do that. You have to call through an API. And I'm really noticing is that there's a big group of individuals that there's the younger generation that understands APIs. And what I'm seeing is that there's an older generation that's not getting the API and they're really struggling with that, and they're keep me on SQL the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so
I know what you mean about APIs. It was I read an article probably a couple of years ago that everything is moving to API, right? It's an API world. You just live in it. And then that's part of what cloud is, right? You're not going to get access to the raw tables, but hey, here's an API that you can use to call and do what you need to do. So it is a completely different method of working and thinking about how to do things.
And even with that API, a lot of them, when you start querying the data, you can like send the data to the database. But if you start querying, how do you query millions of records across an API? And they're charging you every time. Some providers charge you, Salesforce, how many times you use their API. I mean, it's and you could actually run out of API calls, and then they just shut you off. So it is a challenge.
Yeah. So I guess, from a technology you're most worried about, kind of the flip side of what gets you excited, what are you worried about? Is it APIs?
No, it's in fact, I was just talking about this down the hall right before I joined here, and I was like, what keeps it is the, it's funny, what keeps me up at night is the hackers. Still to this day. We wrote a program that if you try to log into any one of our IP addresses incorrectly after 10 times, it will block that IP address. And it blocks it on all of our servers. So we kind of report to the mothership and then send something out to all the servers saying, do not accept anything from this, and any of our firewalls, do not accept anything from this IP address. And I was just looking at the central logs, and it's 8,600 IP addresses tried to log in unsuccessfully to us, and I only have 22 IP addresses whitelisted out of that. So what shows me is that there's a lot of people still, that are trying to get there. And within the people down the hall, when we were talking about that, he goes to me and he goes, there's no consequence for hacking. And I go, no, I don't think there is. It's like, hey, this country hacked us, or it was this area. It's not like a person, and that person is never going to be here in the United States. So to me, it's just the dangers of cloud computing, to this day. What's the unknown? And try and be one step ahead of them. So, I even go back to my daughter yesterday back in college. They're pushing down dual authentication to their for everything, and so they have it on their web, and it's great technology. I mean, the college did a great job, but she's like, oh, what a pain! Every time I log in from a different device, I have to authorize it, and I said, okay, well, authorize my devices. But beyond that, it's very, you have to stay one step ahead of the hackers.
Yeah, two-factor authentication. Yeah, well, like I said, I know everyone recommends two-factor authentication, but just like your daughter, it is kind of a pain sometimes.
Exactly. No, my daughter's not a pain. Just the technology.
No, I know. No, she's saying two-factor authentication is a pain. That's not what I meant. So
I was having fun with you.
Okay. So with that, we are at our rapid fire round. So this is just a couple of quick questions. Easy answer. Don't think about it too much. Just answer whichever one. Some are multiple choice, but it's really pretty easy. So are you ready for the rapid fire?
Go for it.
All right. So first up, Apple or Android?
Apple, reluctantly.
Okay. Mac, Linux, or Windows?
Windows.
Okay. Amazon or Azure, or something different?
Something different.
What would that be? MicroAccounting?
MicroAccounting, yes, yeah.
Yes, okay. Local backups or cloud or both?
Can never have enough backups, but I still believe in cloud backups.
Okay, great. And then
actually, we do both.
Okay, that's typically the right answer, right? And then of course this one, it's typically geared towards our MSP customers, but you probably have dealt with this in your career. Printer support or vendor cold calls? Which is worse?
Vendor cold calls.
Okay.
So they call my cell phone now.
Yeah, once they get that number, it's definitely out there. So that was rapid fire. Pretty easy. It's just a little segment we like to do here. Now with that, before we leave, any additional wisdom, comments, questions that you want to put out there for our audience?
No, I mean, I really appreciate this. It's a changing world. We're happy to be part of this. And I was reading through one of your questions. I was reading through. You had a kind of a list of pre-questions you sent me, and one of them is, what do you say people about getting into this industry? And I'm like, don't do it. it's you have to. It's a lot of time, money, and investment. And if you've been around, it's definitely worth it. But it's it's changing. I think the good part about technology is that in 10 years we are going to be doing something completely different. I'm hoping there's a new operating system somewhere out there that will beat Windows. But it kind of, again, it's kind of like what most of us are used to at this point. So.
Yeah. Well, some would say it might be Chrome OS, especially with the push they're putting into education. So.
I hope so. You know what? If they can continue it, if they can continue it, go for it.
Yeah. So great, Stuart. Thank you very much for being on MSP Voice. I really appreciate your time, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.